Hello. All right, so we are here for part 2. We have finished the second page and the third page. You're on page 4 on the project where it says the tax code. So what this video is going to do is it's going to explain how we do income tax in America, and we are going to kind of talk about the system as far as how the breakdown of taxes works. So the very basic explanation is in America, we have what is called a progressive tax rate. So what that means is if you make money in this first chunk right here, so this would be chunk number 1. If you make money in chunk number 1, then all of the money you make within that range gets taxed at 10%. Okay? If you happen to make more money and you go into the second tax group, so if you're between that 9,000 and that 38,000, we go into tax group 2, that money is taxed at 12%. What this does not mean is if you're in here, all of your money is taxed at 12. So that's not how it works. What it means is, say again, I have $12,000 as my income. Okay. 9,525 of those dollars are getting taxed in this group here at tax rate 1. So $9,525 is being taxed at 10%. And then the leftover amount, so that extra approximately $3,000, it's going to be just under $3,000. That whatever that extra amount there is, the extra is the only part getting taxed at 12%. Okay, so we are going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. We're going to look at how to do it. I'm going to do this top table with you. You are going to do the top table or the bottom table with the X on it on your own. Okay, so how I set this up and what I did to work on it is the first thing we want to know is the ranges of income. So how big is that grouping going to be? So the first thing I want to do is figure out the range of income. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two numbers and subtract them. So 9,525 minus 0. My first range here is still $9,525. Okay, my second range between this 38,700 and 9,526, it is $1 above that to get us out of that range. To figure out how big that range is going to be, you are going to subtract those numbers. So 38700 minus 9,526. So I just took the numbers out of there. I subtracted them. That winds up being 29,174. Okay, so what you're doing is trying to figure out how much money is in that range. How big of a difference is there in your ranges? So you're just going to go through for each one of these, and you want to do that subtraction there. Okay, I'm going to do the next one, which is 82,500 minus 38,701. That range is $43,799 wide, okay? So you want to figure out how big of a range. Oops, I missed a number there. How big of a range is this tax bracket? Okay, you're going to go through and do that subtraction for each one of these. Now, I went ahead and did that before we recorded, so we could kind of figure out a little bit easier what is going on in my big range. Okay, so we got the third range. The fourth range, when you subtract those numbers, you wind up with 74,999. Okay, next range, we subtract, you get 42,999, and all you're doing is looking for how big of a difference is there between those numbers. Okay, so 3, 4, 5. The sixth range, I wrote too many numbers. The sixth range has a difference of 299,999. So 299,999. And I found these ranges just by subtracting my ending number in the range minus the beginning number. Now, the nice thing is we don't have to worry about the range for this last group. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, just so you can see where they lined up. Okay, we know our rates here. So what we want to do now is figure out what amount of money, what value of money will each of these ranges make in tax dollars. So you're going to take your percent, you're going to take your rate for each group times this range number, okay? So you will need to turn your percents into decimals for this. Again, I'm going to help you guys out with this first grouping, and you'll be on your own for the second one. So if my first amount, we take our range here, 9525, times the tax rate, in this case 10%, becomes 0.10 because we bumped that decimal twice. Okay, I'll go ahead and show y'all how to do that again one more time. If you don't remember, take your decimal, you bump it twice, and it goes right in the front. So in this case, 10% becomes 0.10. When you multiply, okay, you come on back over to your calculator, take the range you got, so 9525 times 0.10, and we find out the amount of tax you would pay if you filled up that range is $952.50. Okay? Still not done, but we're going to keep going. So you want to find the amount for all of those. Okay? Do the same thing here. So my 29,174, we got a 12%. So we're going to take that same number, 29,174 times, decimal this time is 12%, so 0.12. Do that multiplication, see what we get. Use the handy dandy calculator to help us. 29174 times 0.12. And we find out that the amount of taxes for that range is $3,500 and 88 cents. Okay. Keep going with that. So you take the number, multiply by the rate, find out what we get here. I'm going to do one more of these with you, okay? So we take the third range, 43799. We take our third range of 43799 times, this time it's 22%, so times 0.22. And we find out the amount of taxes in that third range. Okay, so we took our 43799 times 0.22, which gives us the amount for this next range is $9,635.78. Okay, figure those numbers out for all of them. You do the multiplication. You write down what we get. For the next grouping, we wind up with 17,999.76. Okay. For the next grouping, take your 42,999 times our 32%. We wind up with 13,599. Misread my comma, 599. and 68 cents. Okay, keep it going. We just did 5, so then number 6 is our 299,999. 299,999 times that 35%, you wind up, if you wind up in that tax bracket, you could be paying $104,000 with 999 and 65 cents. So all I did was multiply my range times that rate to figure out the amount of taxes that you could pay in each of these brackets. The very last step is to start utilizing these numbers. We're going to be adding them up to figure out what our totals should be here, what we should pay in taxes. So if you notice, this number that we got from multiplying is going to go into this box right here. So the first thing we figured out is a 925.50. Okay, and you may notice that you don't have enough space in your box. So if you need to resize it, you can. These numbers get pretty big, right? So the first one, we just take the last from it. To figure out the next box, we are going to have to pay the original 95250. And so for this, we're going to pay this original number. Okay, because that's how much tax we pay for being in the first bracket. And we're going to pay this number as well, because this would be how much you pay to be in the second bracket. And when we have to and them, when we're paying them together, we would add. So to figure out what goes in your next box, you take the two amounts you got. So I got 952.50 plus my 3500.88. And that tells me in this bracket, we would pay $4,453.38. Again, if you need to resize your box, do so. Okay? Into the next bracket, we're still going to have to pay this amount, and we're going to add on the next bracket's worth of taxes. So this third amount here, we would add on what we're going to pay. Okay, so we take what we just had, that 4,453 and 38, plus that next bracket's worth of money, 9635.78. Oops, make sure you're super careful with your decimals. That will greatly change your numbers. So now if we go into this next bracket, you would be paying $14,000 and $14,089.16. Remember, resize the box if you need to so your whole answer fits in there neatly. Okay, we're going to keep going in this way until our table is filled out. So now we're going to add on our next chunk of tax dollars. Okay, so we're going to add on the next chunk of tax dollars. Gives us 17999.76. Add it all up. We find out that the next bracket would be paying close to $32,088.92. Okay, the next group, we want to add on that next bracket there. So they're still going to pay the same amount original, right? That $32,888.92 plus this additional $13,599.68. That means if you're in this tax bracket, you're going to be paying at least $45,688.60. Make sure that you always put the second decimal point there when we talk about money. Stretch your box out. Finally, if you make over $500,000 a year, which you definitely don't if you're a teacher, but if you happen to make that amount of money, $500,000, that means you make more money every year than my whole fresh or college bachelor's degree and my master's degree. That's a whole lot of money to make. If you make that much money, you're going to pay this $45,000 and this additional 104,999.65. Make sure we write it in there all neat. Find out what we get. So if you make over 500,000, that is $500,000 a year. If you make $500,000 a year, you will pay $150,688.25 in taxes. Okay. So we just did this whole first one together. We're going to review what we did really quickly. The first thing you need to do is figure out how big is my range here. And remember, the range is how much money is in between the two numbers in this first row. Okay, that's what we want to do first. The second thing you want to do is figure out what is the amount of money that would be paid in taxes. So you want to make yourself a nice little list here. What would be the amount of money I pay in taxes? The last thing that you will do, part 3, is to actually come onto this chart and you want to start adding up the amounts in each grouping. Okay? That's going to tell you how much the base amounts of taxes are for each of these tax brackets. Okay? Figure out how big is the range, what is the amount of taxes that you would pay there, and then start adding them up to fill in this chart. All right? That is all you got to do here for part 3. The next video will go over part 4 and part 5.